Goblin launch detected.
This video is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. with free weekly content and free shipping on orders over $150. You can save 5% site-wide by using the promo code MTGMudsta. If you're looking for a direct way to help the channel, please consider joining my Patreon and becoming a member of the generic Goblin Gang. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's game has Kuzno, Seb, and Maxim joining me for a commander game. Kuzno is playing his 9 Fingers Keene deck, keeping Scoot Swarm, Notion Thief, Swiftfoot Boots, Ramming Up Excavator, Swamp, and a Gateway Plaza. Seb is playing their newly made Goro Goro and Satoru deck, keeping Talisman of Dominance, Island, Bajuka Bog, Perplexing Test, 2 Mountains, and a Merfolk Windrobber. Max is playing his newly made Commodore Guff deck, keeping Exotic Orchard, Forge of Heroes, Frostboil Snarl, a Plains, Izzet Signet, a Johnny Caller of the Pride, and Giver of Runes. I am also playing a Planeswalker with Dihada, keeping Takenuma, Abandoned Mire, Hall of Heliod's Generosity, By Force, Blasphemous Act, Tainted Field, Sulphurous Springs, and Lotho, Corrupt Sheriff. Kuzno wins a die roll and starts us off. He draws and plays a Swamp. Seb's got an Island for turn and casts a Merfolk Windrobber. Max just plays a Plains and taps it for a Giver of Runes. I draw and play Sulphurous Springs, passing to Kuzno as we move to turn 2. Kuzno draws and plays a Gateway Plaza, paying the 1 so it doesn't get sacrificed. Seb draws and plays a Mountain. 2 mana gets them a Talisman of Dominance, and moving to combat, Seb swings the Windrobber at me, and after I get hit, I mill a card. After that, they pass. Max plays an Exotic Orchard and pays 2 for an Izzet Signet. My turn has me drawing, and I play a Takenuma. I then take 1 from the Sulphurous Springs to help me cast Cathartic Reunion, discarding some cards and then drawing some as I pass to Kuzno. Kuzno draws and plays an Elvish Reclaimer, passing to Seb after that. Seb's got a Mountain for turn, and take 1 from their Talisman to help cast Goro Goro and Satoru. Moving to combat, Seb pokes Max for 1, and Max mills 1, and Seb passes. Max draws and plays a Pillar Verge Pathway, and then has enough mana for his commander, Commodore Guff. He upticks them to make a wizard token, and passes. I draw and just play Hall of Heliod's Generosity. Kuzno draws, but still can't find his 3rd land, and has to pass. Seb plays a Maestro Diabolist in their main phase, and goes to combat. Once more they swing the Windrobber at me, and Goro Goro and Satoru go at Max, and the Diabolist goes at Kuzno. They make a Devil token from the Diabolist trigger, and Max gives his Wizard's protection from red with the Giver of Runes, and then blocks Seb's commanders. While Kuzno and I aren't so lucky though, and just take the hit. This has Seb making 2 dragons from Goro Goro, and after that, they play a Bajuka Bog, exiling my graveyard. Max draws and plays a Frostboil Snarl tapped, and then casts a Johnny Caller of the Pride. He upticks the Walker to give a +1/+1 counter onto the Giver of Runes, and then plays Talisman of Creativity. He follows up by down-ticking Guff to deal 2 to each of his opponents, and draws 2. He then moves to his end step. Max gets his Commodore Guff trigger at the end of turn, and puts a loyalty counter onto a Johnny, and then passes to me. In my main phase, I take 1 from the Sulphurous Springs to help cast Blasphemous Act, which has Kuzno responding by using his Reclaimer to sacrifice a Swamp for Vesuva, copying an Exotic Orchard as it comes in. Max also protects his Wizard token with the Giver of Runes. Seb gets a Death trigger from the Devil Dying, dealing 1 to a Johnny. I then follow up with my own Bajuka Bog, and use it on Seb, and pass. Kuzno draws and plays a Swiftfoot Boots. Unfortunately, he still doesn't have a 3rd land, and has to pass to Seb. Seb draws and plays a Dragon's Horde, but with nothing else, passes. Max plays a Mobilized District as his land for turn, and taps 1 white for an Esper Sentinel. He then upticks a Johnny on it and gives it a counter. He then upticks Guff to make another wizard token, and as he moves to his end step, puts a loyalty counter onto a Johnny and passes. I draw and play a thematic compass, not paying for the Esper Sentinel, so Max gets to draw. I then play a tainted field, and once that's out, activate the compass to find a swamp and pass to Kuzno. Kuzno draws and plays an Urborg Elf, but still doesn't have a land and has to pass. Seb's turn is quite quick as they draw and then play a Whisper Silk Cloak and pass to Max. Max draws and plays a Cascade Bluffs. He then upticks a Johnny again, once more targeting the Sentinel. And once that's done, upticks his commander to make another wizard token. He follows that up by playing and then cracking a Wayfarer's Bauble to find a Plains. Once he's done shuffling, he then casts Leori. After that, Max moves to his end step and gets to put another loyalty counter onto a Johnny with Commodore Guff's end of turn trigger. My turn has me drawing and playing a swamp. I then cast Dihada and down Tigger to mill 4, and I don't keep any of them, and I make 4 treasures. I then crack the treasures to immediately cast a Dark Petition with Spell Mastery, but have nothing to use the black mana that's floating from it, and I go search for a card and pass. Kuzno draws and plays a Ramunap Excavator, and is then able to play a swamp from his graveyard. He then pays to equip the Swiftfoot Boots onto the Urborg Elf to protect his mana dork since he needs it so badly, and he passes to Seb. Seb draws and plays a swamp for turn. They then cast Rankle and equip it with the Whisper Silk Cloak. Going to combat, Seb swings Rankle at a Johnny to keep a Johnny from ultimating, and after Rankle connects, pass to Max. Max draws and plays Chandra Pyrogenius, and then down ticks a Johnny to give Leori double strike. Going to combat, he swings Leori at Kuzno, who connects twice, and gets 2 triggers, naming Chandra twice. Before leaving the combat step though, Seb in response casts a blue Elemental Blast and targets Chandra to blow her up. Max then down ticks Guff, once more dealing 2 and drawing 2, and then plays an Arcane Signet and passes. I draw and play Lotho, and then uptick Dihada, giving Lotho Vigilance, Lifelink, and Indestructible until my next turn. I then play a land for turn, and uptick the compass to go and find a Plains, and as I move to my end step, I get to transform the compass as I have 7 or more lands. Kuzno draws and plays a Seagate, choosing green as a second color, but with nothing else, he has to pass. Seb draws and plays an island. Going to combat, Rankle goes at a Johnny again. And in their second main phase, Seb then recasts Goro Goro and Satoru. They wrap things up by moving the Whisper Silk Cloak onto their commander, and pass after that. Max draws and plays an Interplanar Beacon. He then pays 1 for a Soul Ring, and then casts Jaya's Phoenix. Going to combat, Max swings the Jaya's Phoenix and Leori at Seb, who takes the hit. And Max picks a Johnny for the Leori trigger after dealing the damage. After combat, Max then activates a Johnny and gets 3 of the triggers, stacking the counters onto the Esper Sentinel. He then upticks Commodore Guff, making a wizard token. Max then moves to his end step and puts a counter onto a Johnny and passes. I draw, and once more downtick Dihada, keeping no cards and making 4 treasures. I then play the Plains I found last turn, and pass. During my end step, Kuzno casts Vraska's Contempt to exile Leori. Kuzno draws, but without a land, has to pass. Seb's got a mountain for turn, and they then go to combat, swinging Goro Goro at a Johnny and Rankle at Max's face. Before damage, Max responds by casting Semester's End, exiling a Johnny, Guff, and Jaya's Phoenix. Max does still take 3 from Rankle, and Seb chooses that we all just lose a life and draw a card, And before resolving the trigger, Kuzno flashes in a Notion Thief. With the Notion Thief out, but before allowing the draw trigger to resolve, Seb casts a Perplexing Test to bounce all non-token creatures so that we can all draw from Rankle. Seb then passes, and during their end step, all of Max's Planeswalkers and the Phoenix return with an extra loyalty counter and a +1/+1 counter. Max draws and plays a mountain. He plays Talisman of Progress and then casts Jace the Perfected Mind for the full cost. He follows that up with Experimental Augury to proliferate his Planeswalkers. And then casts Jace Mirror Mage, paying the kicker to make a copy as well. Max then upticks his bigger Jace to Scry 2, and then zeroes the copy of Jace and reveals Chandra, Flame's Fury. Max follows it up by downticking a Johnny and puts the trigger onto Jaya's Phoenix, and then goes to combat. He swings the Phoenix at Kuzno for 5 with Double Strike, and Kuzno takes both hits. After combat, Max then downticks Guff and gets 3 triggers and deals a total of 12 to us and draws 12. He then plays out a Johnny Strength of the Pride and upticks him to gain 10 life. After all that, Max passes, and I activate my Hall of Heliod's Generosity during his end step to put Reign of Riches on top. I draw my Reign of Riches and then play a Smoldering Marsh. I play the Reign of Riches and make 2 treasures as it comes in. I then crack 5 treasures to cast a Mana Geyser and Cascade. I Cascade into a Fury Storm, which copies the Mana Geyser twice, making me a total of 51 red mana. I then cast Bonus Round after that, and then cast Past in Flames. I then cast the Bonus Round again, and then cast the Fury Storm again to get really complicated and make a lot of copies of stuff. With 6 copies of Bonus Round total this turn, I then play a Heartwarming Redemption, copied 6 times. I keep drawing and discarding and adding 1 card to my hand, finally ending up with a total of 12 cards and jumping up to 63 life. I then flash back once more Past in Flames from my graveyard, and I'm able to cast a Storm King's Thunder for more copies, which I then use to cast many Exsanguinates to drain the table. Game review time. This game was 49 minutes and 9 seconds, and for editing purposes, this is pretty much the sweet spot in terms of gameplay and being able to edit in a timely fashion and still have a decent sized game at the end of it. I think the 2 Planeswalker decks showcase themselves the best, I think with Commodore Guff just being really cool and making me really actually want to build Jeskai Super Friends. I was surprised I had really no interest in the deck until I saw it in action, and Max did a great job despite the fact that most of his deck was just cards he had laying around that he threw in. I'm always up front with the table when I bring up my Dihada deck and explain that it's a graveyard-based spell combo deck, and people tend to not have a problem with it until I go off. Kuzno had a really rough game, and not having any lands, despite the fact that he basically is playing a land-based deck, really set him back. He only got his 3rd land by like turn 5 or turn 6, and even then he didn't draw into it. He had to have the Ramming Excavator pull it from his graveyard. That is not where you want to be that late in the game. Seb's Goro Goro and Satoru deck, which is just really fun to say, was kind of cool to see. And we actually got to see the ability going off with Seb making 2 dragons from that turn with the Maestro Diabolist and the Devil token coming in and swinging. I love these kind of decks because it requires you to build very specifically around your commander's ability, but the payoff is huge. Seb just got unlucky because I had that Blasphemous Act that turn after their really good turn. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, Cool Stuff Inc., Multizone, Original Magic Art, and Alter Sleeves. But it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.